Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves.
The road has a way of making you vulnerable. You're alone, you're tired, and when someone offers you a ride, you don't always think about why they stopped. These are 3 true hitchhiking horror stories, and each one is a reminder that the person behind the wheel might have their own reasons for picking you up. This first story was sent in by a listener who was hitchhiking through upstate New York. He calls it The Driver Who Knew My Route. What makes this one unnerving isn't what happened to him. It's what the driver already knew before they ever spoke a word. The car pulled over before I had my thumb out. That's the part that still doesn't sit right with me. I was standing on the shoulder of Route 17 outside of Binghamton, New York, early October, maybe 6 in the evening. The sun was already dropping behind the tree line, and the air had that cold bite to it that tells you summer is done pretending. I'd been hitchhiking from Ithaca back to Scranton after a weekend visiting a friend at Cornell. My car had broken down 2 days earlier and I couldn't afford the repair, so I was doing the trip in legs, hitching rides with truckers, college kids, whoever stopped. This guy stopped in a dark green sedan, older model, maybe early 2000s Buick. Clean inside though, no trash, no air freshener, no smell at all actually, which in hindsight was strange for a car that looked like it had 200,000 miles on it. He was maybe mid-50s, thin face, wire-rimmed glasses, smiled at me and said I looked like I was heading towards Scranton. I hadn't told him that. I hadn't said a word yet. I just nodded and got in because honestly I was cold and tired and not thinking clearly. The first 20 minutes were normal. He asked surface-level questions, where I went to school, what I was studying. I gave him short answers because I wasn't in the mood to talk. He didn't seem to mind. He drove the speed limit exactly, not 1 mile over it. His hands were at 10 and 2 the entire time. I remember noticing that because it felt rehearsed, like he was performing the act of driving. Then he said something that made my neck go cold. He said, "You usually stop at that gas station in Halstead, right? The one with the blue awnings." And I did. I had stopped there on my way up 2 days ago. I asked him what he meant and he just smiled and said he was good at reading people. But that's not reading people, that's knowing something. I started paying closer attention. There was no GPS mounted on the dash, but he was taking the exact route I'd taken on the way up. Not the highway route, the back roads I'd chosen because a trucker had recommended them. He turned onto County Road 11 without me saying anything. He slowed down at the same curve where I'd seen a deer 2 days before. And when we passed a small white church on the left, he said, "That's a nice one, isn't it?" I'd taken a photo of that church on Thursday. My phone was in my jacket pocket. I started thinking about who I'd shared my location with. I hadn't told anyone my exact route. I texted my friend in Ithaca under my jacket, just the words "I think something is wrong." The driver glanced at me, not at my face, at my pocket, and he said, "You don't need to do that." I asked him to pull over. He didn't respond. I said it again, louder. He just kept driving at exactly the speed limit, hands at 10 and 2. Then he said, "I'm going to get you home safe." That's what I do. I grabbed the door handle. It was locked, child locked, I realized. He must have seen the panic on my face because he said, "Calm down," in this voice that was so flat it didn't sound like advice. It sounded like an instruction. We were approaching an intersection, and I saw headlights coming from the cross street. I unbuckled and threw my elbow into the horn. The other car stopped. The driver of my car stopped too, almost reflexively. In that 2-second window, I pulled the lock up manually, shoved the door open, and fell onto the road. I scrambled toward the other car, some woman in a minivan, and she let me in. I looked back at the green sedan. The driver was just sitting there, not angry, not panicked, just watching me with that same flat expression. Then he pulled away, slowly, speed limit, hands at 10 and 2. I filed a police report. They never found the car, but the officer told me something that made it worse. He said 2 other hitchhikers in that corridor had reported a similar vehicle in the past year. One of them was never found. Something about that story stays with you. The idea that someone was watching, following, learning your routine before they ever offered you a ride, and you'd never know unless something felt off just enough to make you pay attention. This next story takes place in the American Southwest. A listener sent this in about a couple who picked him up outside Flagstaff, Arizona. He calls it the couple with the empty car seat. And honestly, this one just made me uncomfortable in a way I can't fully explain. There was a car seat in the back, but no child. I noticed it the second I climbed in, and something about it felt wrong immediately. It wasn't just empty, it was pristine. No crumbs, no stains, no toys hanging from the handle. It looked like it had been installed that morning and never used. This was outside Flagstaff, Arizona, late August. I was 23 and doing a cross-country trip with almost no money, sleeping in rest areas and hitching between cities. The couple who picked me up were in their 30s, clean-cut, driving a white SUV. The woman was in the passenger seat. She turned around and smiled at me when I got in. The man driving didn't smile. He just said, "Where are you headed?" I told him Albuquerque. He said they could get me as far as Gallup. That was perfect. For the first hour, the woman did most of the talking. She asked me about my trip, where I'd been, what I'd seen. Normal road conversation, but the man barely spoke. He'd nod sometimes or adjust the mirror. Every time he adjusted the mirror, he wasn't checking traffic. He was looking at me, at the car seat, back at me. Around the second hour, the woman asked if I wanted to stop for food. I said sure. We pulled into a diner off I-40, somewhere between Holbrook and Chambers. We sat in a booth and ordered. While we were eating, the woman excused herself to the restroom. The man looked at me across the table and said, "She's going to ask you something when she comes back. Just say yes." I asked him what he meant. He shook his head and went back to eating. When the woman came back, she was carrying a small stuffed animal, a rabbit, pale yellow, clearly brand new. She set it on the table next to my plate and said, "Would you mind holding onto this for the drive, for the seat, so it's not empty?" I didn't know what to say, so I said okay. When we got back to the car, she placed the stuffed rabbit in the car seat and buckled the chest strap over it. She adjusted it carefully, like she was securing a real child. The man watched her in the rearview mirror, and his jaw was tight. The mood in the car shifted after that. The woman started talking to the car seat, not loudly, just murmurs, little things like, "We're almost through the reservation," and "Look at the rocks, baby." The man turned the radio on, I think to cover the sound. I sat there behind the driver's seat trying to convince myself this was just grief, that they'd lost a child, and this was how they were coping. But then we stopped for gas outside Gallup, and while the man was at the pump, the woman turned around and looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It was completely calm. She said, "He thinks I don't know, but I know what he did. I know where the real one is." I didn't respond. I couldn't. She turned back around and stared forward like she hadn't said anything. The man got back in the car and asked if I wanted to be dropped at the truck stop or the on-ramp. I said the truck stop. First, when I got out, I looked through the back window. The woman had taken the stuffed rabbit out of the car seat and was holding it against her chest. The man was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. They pulled away and merged onto the highway. I stood there in the truck stop parking lot for a long time. I thought about calling the police. I didn't know their names. I didn't get the plate number. I didn't have anything concrete to report. She said she knew where the real one is. I don't know what that means. Part of me thinks she was talking about a child, and part of me is certain the man knew exactly what she meant, and that's why he was afraid. And that one leaves a lot unanswered, and sometimes the stories that don't give you a clear answer are the ones that haunt you the most. You just sit with it, and it gets worse the more you think about it. This last story is the most disturbing one I received for this video. It was sent in by a listener who was hitchhiking through rural Missouri. He calls it the pickup with the tarp in the bed. I'll let him tell it. The smell hit me before I even closed the door. Sweet and thick, like rotting fruit mixed with something metallic. The driver said it was fertilizer. I wanted to believe him. This was in rural Missouri, somewhere along Highway 63 between Rolla and West Plains. Late September, overcast, the kind of gray sky that makes the whole world feel like it's holding its breath. I'd been walking for over 2 hours after my last ride dropped me at a junction that led to nowhere useful. When the black pickup pulled over, I was relieved. The guy driving was big, broad-shouldered, wearing a canvas jacket and a ball cap pulled low. He said he was headed south toward the Arkansas line. That worked for me. I tossed my backpack in the bed of the truck before I got in. That's when I saw the tarp. It was pulled tight over something in the truck bed, bungee corded at the corners. The shape underneath was long and uneven. Could have been anything. Lumber, feed bags, tools, but the way it was covered felt deliberate. Not like someone tossed a tarp over cargo, like someone tucked it in. I got in anyway. I know how that sounds, but you have to understand, when you've been walking for hours on a road with no cell signal and no traffic, you make decisions you wouldn't make in civilization. The cab was cluttered. Fast food wrappers, empty cans, a pair of work gloves on the dash that had dark stains on the fingers. The smell was stronger inside, and the man had the windows cracked like he was used to airing it out. I asked him again what was in the back. He said supplies for his property. He didn't look at me when he said it. We drove for maybe 40 minutes. He didn't talk much. When he did, it was about the land down south. How quiet it was. How nobody bothered him. How you could do whatever you wanted out there and no one would know. He said that last part looking straight at the road, but his voice had a different quality, like he was telling me something specific. I noticed the gloves on the dash had been moved. They were now on the seat between us, closer to his right hand. I don't know when he moved them. I started watching his hands. They were huge. The knuckles were scarred, and there was something dark under his fingernails that wasn't dirt. It was too red to be dirt. We passed a small town, a few buildings, a closed gas station, a church. I said I could get out here. He said there's nothing here. You'd be stuck. He was right, but I said it again anyway. He didn't slow down. He said the next town was 30 minutes, and he dropped me there. His tone wasn't aggressive. It was patient, and that patience scared me more than anger would have. 10 minutes later, he pulled off the highway onto a gravel road. He said it was a shortcut. The road went into trees almost immediately. Thick forest on both sides, no houses, no mailboxes. I put my hand on the door handle. He noticed. He said, "Don't be stupid." I asked where we were going. He said he needed to drop the supplies off first, then he'd take me to town. The truck slowed as we approached a clearing. There was a structure in the trees, not a house, more like a cinder block building with no windows. A metal door, a generator beside it. The ground around it was torn up like someone had been digging recently. Several spots, uneven mounds of earth that had been patted down, but not well enough to hide what they were. He stopped the truck and turned off the engine. Then he looked at me for the first time since I'd gotten in. Really looked at me. He said, "You can help me unload." I didn't think. I pulled the handle, threw the door open, and ran. I ran into the trees and I didn't stop. I heard him shout something, but I didn't process the words. I crashed through brush and branches for what felt like 20 minutes until I hit a fence line. I followed the fence until I found a road. I followed the road until I found a house with a truck in the driveway. An old man lived there. He let me use his phone. The sheriff came. I told them everything. The highway, the gravel road, the cinder block building, the mounds in the ground. They said they'd look into it. I gave them every detail I could remember about the truck, the driver, the location. I called back 2 weeks later to follow up. The deputy I spoke to was quiet for a moment and then said they'd found the building. He said the investigation was ongoing and he couldn't share details. I asked him if they found anything in the ground. He didn't answer. He just said I was lucky and that I should be more careful about getting into strangers' vehicles. I never hitchhiked again, but I still think about what was under that tarp, and I think about how patient he was, like he'd done this before, like he had a system, and I think about the fact that nobody ever called me back about that case, not once. And thanks for listening. Be careful who you trust on the road, and if something feels wrong, it probably is.
And that's where tonight's file closes. But the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.